October 1872. A widow with a month to clear out. No children, no income, no man to put his name to her keep. And the almanac men and the old farmers agreeing for once on one grim thing, that the coming winter would be the hardest in 50 years. No one knew why the widow spent her last weeks building a small room inside her own front room. They decided grief had turned her odd. They understood in January, when the cabin everyone could afford to heat had killed people in their beds, and the strange little room inside the widow's room was the warmest four walls in the township. But in October, it was just a curiosity to chew on at the store. Her name was Mercy Coyle, 34. Her husband, Elias, had been kicked by a dray horse and lingered a fortnight and died, and his brother arrived with a clean deed and a clear conscience and gave her until the snow. The cabin was Elias's, which meant it was the brother's now, and the brother had a buyer who wanted it empty. Mercy did not pack. She studied the cabin, a single drafty room, 20 feet by 16, with a stone hearth that ate wood by the armload and gave back a heat that died 3 feet from the fire. She had wintered in that room for 9 years, and she knew its truth in her bones. It could not be kept warm. It was too big, too leaky, too open to the night. On the coldest mornings, she and Elias had woken with frost on the inside of the quilts, 4 feet from a banked fire. And that was the whole of her idea. If she could not heat the room, she would stop trying to. She would heat something smaller. Much smaller. So Mercy built a room inside her room. In the corner farthest from the door, she framed a little box of a chamber, 6 feet by 7, just tall enough to stand in. With rough lumber walls, she raised a few inches off the floor on a platform of planks. She built it double-walled, an outer skin and an inner skin with the gap between them packed tight with dry straw and sawdust and chaff, the way they packed an ice house, the way they banked a cellar. She sealed it the same way, a foot of packed straw overhead, and she floored it over straw as well, so that on every side, walls, roof, floor, there was a thick, still blanket of trapped air between her and the cold. The door of it was small and low and snug, hung with a quilt on the inside. There was no hearth in the little room and no stove. A fire in a sealed box that size is a slow, quiet death, and Mercy knew it. Instead, she kept the cabin's hearth for cooking and for heating, of all things, bricks. She'd bake a half-dozen common clay bricks in the coals through the evening, then carry them glowing warm into the little room, set them in an iron pan on a stone, and let them give their heat back slow into a space small enough to hold it. A few hot bricks would have vanished without a trace in the big, cold cabin. In a straw-walled box, you could nearly touch wall to wall. They were enough. They and the warmth of her own sleeping body, which, in a space that small and that well-wrapped, was no small thing at all. She tested it the first hard night, shut into her little room with her bricks and her quilt door, and in the morning, the big cabin around her was bitter, frost feathered on every window. Inside the little room, the thermometer read 44, on 6 bricks and her own breath. The brother's buyer came by, saw a strange box built in the corner of the room he meant to purchase, and went away saying the widow had gone soft in the head. Folks at the store agreed it was a pity. A room inside a room. What next? Then the winter the almanac promised came down, and it was worse than the almanac dared print. The cold settled in the first week of January and would not break. 18 below, then 25, then a still gray morning the tavern glass read 36 under zero, the lowest in 50 years, exactly as the old men had feared. And it held, day on day, with a wind that searched out every cabin in the township. Wood that should have lasted to March was gone by the 3rd week. The Garrett family burned the rail fence and then the corn crib. Old Deacon Fry, who had let no one fuss over him, was found gone gray in his chair, an arm's length from a dead hearth. 2 children south of the creek did not wake, the fire having failed in the night. Every one of those homes had a hearth, and every hearth threw its heat up the chimney and out through the walls into a 36 below dark that swallowed it whole. They were big rooms, every one, and you cannot heat a big, leaking room against that kind of cold. You can only feed it and watch it fail. And in the Coyle cabin, the big room froze too. frost on the windows, ice in the water pail, while in the corner, behind a quilt, in a box of straw-packed walls, Mercy Coyle slept warm on 6 baked bricks and did not so much as shiver. The Garrett woman came first, half mad with cold, her husband behind her carrying their littlest. They'd remembered the strange box, and remembered too that no smoke to speak of came from the widow's chimney, and a house with almost no fire that hadn't gone silent was a thing worth walking toward. Mercy opened the cabin, saw them blue and shaking, and brought them straight across the cold big room to the small, warm one. "In here," she said, "the little room. It holds." Before I tell you who knocked at that door last, if you're in the warm little room with Mercy now, do one small thing for me. Tap subscribe so the next story finds you. Then let me finish it. Word went around the frozen township the way it does. They came to the Coyle place in 2s and 3s, and Mercy crowded them into her little straw-walled room in shifts, 6 and 8 at a time, warmed them on baked bricks, and taught every soul who came the thing the whole town had laughed at. Stop heating the house. You can't win it. Frame a small room, a closet, a box bed, wall it with straw, with sawdust, with anything that traps still air, and heat that with bricks or stones or your own warm body. Make the space small enough that the little heat you have is enough. A whole township learning from a widow that the secret was to want less room. And on the worst morning, the brother came up the lane, the man who'd handed her the snow. His own house in the village had gone cold around him, despite a roaring grate. His fingers were frostbitten white. He stood in the doorway of the cabin he'd sold out from under her, looking at the strange little room he'd called madness, and the words would not come. Mercy looked at him a long, long moment, long enough for the clean deed and the clear conscience and the whole tidy cruelty of it to come back and stand in the cold between them. Then she lifted the quilt at the small door and said, "There's room for one more, if you don't mind the close quarters." He bent and stepped into the little room and sat among the people his deed had meant to scatter, kept alive by the box he'd mocked. He didn't apologize, but when he ducked back out at dusk, he stopped and said the cabin was hers again, that he'd tear up the sail, and the shame on him was real enough that, for once, he meant it. A newspaper man came when the roads cleared and stood in that little room and wrote the line that followed her. "The widow who built a warm room inside a cold one." The town testified, every family she'd thought, and Mercy Coyle kept her home. She lived in it another 26 years, and she never tore the little room out. She kept it built in the corner, straw-walled and snug, and every hard winter she'd move into it and let the big, handsome room go cold and empty, because she had learned the thing the 50-year winter taught the whole township, and then let it forget again. You don't have to warm the whole house. You only have to warm the small place where you actually are. If you've ever made yourself small and snug to outlast something that everyone bigger couldn't, tell me about it in the comments. And to keep these frontier survival stories coming every week, tap the red subscribe button right below this video.